Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. Welcome back to the Legal Lounge. Today I have a special guest because she's not only a guest here at the Legal Lounge, but she's a friend of mine. And actually, I helped you with a thing or two when it came to your own divorce. So today I have with me Nicole. Nicole, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi. I've been in Charlotte since 2008. I came here for school, and I was working in the fitness industry. And at the end of the year, there was no profit made, which meant no upward mobility in either leadership or financially. So I was like, I'm going to get into selling houses. And I think what everyone else thinks, like HGTV, I'm like riding around showing pretty property. So far from the truth. Could not have been further from the actuality of what the job is. But that's kind of shaped my last 12 years of just becoming a connector in Charlotte and really focusing on how to not be a squirrely salesperson and be a process-oriented, efficient business owner, and how to connect other people so that they can come together, not just for real estate, but for anything they'd need in life. And so I spend most of my time doing that outside of real estate, just bringing people together. And I've got a sweet little boy and a husband at home and 3 dogs that I foster, and I'm getting their mind. And that's about it.
And so bringing that real estate piece a little further out, because you're being kind of humble right now.
Thanks.
So tell us more, what's the name of your company? How many team members do you have? And what's your service area?
Sure. So we cover anywhere within 50 miles of Center City, Charlotte. So we really go up past Mooresville, we go down past Rock Hill, and then everywhere that circles in between. I used to say that we go where the business takes us because we are in business because of referrals, past clients, and people who already know, like, and trust us. So it's less about what specific area, more about the service we can offer regardless of geographic location, but we definitely do stay within that 50 miles. Sometimes people hit us up for Hickory, and I think that's a beautiful area, but it's just out of our scope of, I know the inspectors, I know the home warranty reps, all of that things. So we do stay focused in a 50-mile radius. I own Premier Property Solutions. We've been in business for about a decade, a little more. And we last year did about $111 million in sales. Nice. And that was about 240 transactions and with about 11 people.
Nice. So yes, I was correct. You're being humble. So she leads a team of 11. And you guys are killing it out there. So yeah, first plug, if you are moving to the Charlotte area, give Nicole and her team a call.
We'd love to help.
Yeah. So today's episode is focused really on the aspects of property ownership, real property ownership, dealing with the house when you're in a marriage and separating and divorcing. And I know you have both professional and personal experience with this. So with what you're comfortable sharing, tell us a little bit more about your story.
Sure. So twice, actually, I have owned a property with a spouse that one I purchased with my spouse and we split, and another I purchased before the marriage and we split. And since Charlotte borders North and South Carolina, there's actually different legal, I don't need to tell you, but there are different rules in North and South Carolina on who owns what and what type of documentation you need to have in place. So in both cases, I was able to keep the property for all intents and purposes and decide what to do with it unilaterally. And I, as a professional, I really harp to my female clients. Like, if you are purchasing this property and you're in a serious relationship, or when you become in a serious relationship, these are the things that you're just going to want to keep in mind, because when everyone's happy and everything's going great, it seems like a great idea. And then when you get to the part where there is a potential separation of any kind, it is no longer great and happy. And it's really hard to fight for such a big asset. And so unfortunately, I've been through it personally, but I think that helps me professionally.
Yeah, I would agree. And go one step further, the house for many couples, it is their largest asset, largest investment. Sometimes even more so than a retirement account.
Especially the last 5 years
Yeah.
with the inflation because of COVID.
Yep. And the mortgage interest rates that have changed. And it's critical from the get-go to the extent we can advise people before they are in marriage, or even if they're married, what to look for in the documents that they sign when purchasing property, is to understand that dynamic. Because if you do own property jointly, then guess what? When you separate and divorce, it has to be dealt with and distributed. And if it's distributed to one spouse, then that spouse has to buy out the other spouse, or vice versa, or it has to get sold.
Yep.
And especially if you've made this house your home with memories. And I had a case one time where we almost didn't settle a case because we were arguing over a side table, and it was a side table that fit the perfect wall in the perfect house in the perfect area of town. And it does come down to these small details that could tear apart a whole separation and divorce, from being amicable to being a mudslinging mess.
Yeah, and you see it more than I do. I see all the time in the beginning of the conversation, it's like, oh, we're in agreement. We're going to do this, this, and this. And then as time passes, time is the killer of all deals. And so as the time passes, those agreements become further and further apart, and you're trying to reach new agreements. And the house is a big piece of that because, as you mentioned, it's a larger investment than even most people's 401ks or what they have in the market. And if financial literacy is lacking a lot in this country. And I would even say a lot of times people don't even know what their rate or mortgage is, both parties who've lived there. Like a lot of times, like the husband and wife don't both know how much their mortgage is, what the interest rate is, what the loan payoff is. And a lot of times they're like, oh, let me text my spouse. And so I always advocate that. I think it's important for everyone to know, but I specifically advocate for women to know of, like, don't be caught without knowing the information about your finances, especially as it pertains to your house. Because even when things are good, you're going to want to know it. And if anything happens, death, separation, jobs, you want to know that ahead of time and kind of have your head wrapped around what your finances look like.
Yeah. Especially when a financial change occurs, right? I have another client. He's a pilot. Guess what happened to pilots when COVID hit? Exactly. A number of pilots were grounded and their incomes plunged. And the wife in that situation wasn't necessarily aware of all the financial dynamics of their household. And guess what? Even though he made less money, the mortgage still had to be paid. And it's one of those that if you're not in regular communication and understanding of the financial structure of your marriage and situation, then things hit harder. And you start getting suspicious, and maybe you start even making accusations that would be unfounded before that financial stressor. But it's been more than once. I've even had a situation where my client, if they are the financial provider, primary financial provider, that they get accused of like cheating because the financial structure has changed. And they're like, no, it's more like eggs are more expensive, right? There's more things that we need to address from a financial perspective that, the uninformed spouse just starts getting wrapped up in all these other concerns that may or may not be true.
Yeah, we actually run into that quite a bit as well. And it is crazy because in each profession, not every professional is created the same. Like
Oh, agreed.
It's like you have an attorney who like barely made it through and somehow gets clients, and you have rock stars like yourself, and like you have the same job. And in real estate, it's the same. We have 18,000 realtors in the local Charlotte metro market, and I would say 17,500 of them are not the same as 500 of them.
Yeah.
And it's true in every industry, but it comes down to when you have a complex sale where one party, job change, financial change of any kind, or a relationship change, you really, really, really need to make sure that you have professionals who have experienced this both professionally and or personally to guide, because you really become an impartial party, but you still have a fiduciary responsibility to both of them, which is important because you don't want someone stirring the pot, creating the conversation, making it more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah.
It needs to be the house sale, the house conversation needs to be about the house, not the emotions, not the kids. Like it's to the kids, to the owners, but not to the professional. It's like, if we're selling, this is what this looks like. If you're not selling, this is what this looks like. If you need cash out, this is what this looks like. Which path is going to be best for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's critical. Building relationships is a natural part of life. But how does the law affect those relationships? Do you want to marry your significant other, but have cold feet from the many divorce horror stories out there? Are you preparing for a custody battle against your ex? That is where Modern Legal comes in. We offer education and knowledge about the law when it affects the relationships near and dear to your heart. To learn more about how family law affects your family, book a consultation with an attorney of our Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal Services at modernlegalnc.com. Let's start from the perspective of individuals. Let's say they're engaged. They're in the happy.
How fun.
The happy, happy-go-lucky phase. They're excited. They've already engaged. They're planning the wedding that's in a year. But someone owns real property. What are some things that you would want them to know as a realtor from your perspective before they say I do on their wedding day?
Yeah, anytime my clients get engaged and they own real property, I like to introduce them to what's called a free trader agreement, which basically is where one party, and I could be slaughtering this definition,
Sure.
but this is how I explain it as a non-attorney. It is where one party basically signs their rights away to the property for one reason or another. It's impartial on the document. So it's basically, in this case, it would be, hey, because you owned this property before we were married, it's going to stay your interest moving forward.
Your sole and separate interest in that property. And that type of agreement is a form of what we call a prenup or a premarital agreement. And I would not only second that, but I would go one step further and say that a premarital agreement, at least the ones my firm drafts, I'll pull that plug to your earlier point about different attorneys and how they function, is that a premarital agreement generally will have a free trader agreement. So that person who owns real property before the date of marriage not only maintains that separate interest in that marital property during the marriage itself, so they can freely trade it, but also go one step further that should the parties separate or divorce 5, 10, 15 years down the line, that property is still their separate property. And go one step further, again, depending on what the couple wants to put into the premarital agreement, we can even put something along the lines of anything that they trade for that property. So let's say they sell that house and buy a new house, that new house is also their sole and separate property, which is can get a little complicated as we go through all the what ifs, but it's critical because if you don't sign that free trader agreement, or if you don't sign that premarital agreement, then once you get married, all of the legal obligations and rights change.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't know that, especially if they're planning to just elope in Vegas.
It's funny because my current marriage is the marriage I have the absolute least concerns about. And we have so many documents in place for all of the things. I mean, to each percentage of the house, because we bought the house together, but we brought different amounts to the house. And so if something were to happen to us, or even when we sell, those amounts get divided in equal distribution of what we contributed to start with, and then the growth on top of that. So you can structure it. It doesn't have to be like, this is mine, this is yours. You can have that shared life. It just, it does need to be clear in the event something happens. And most importantly to remember, in the event something happens that's out of my personal control, what is the plan?
Yeah.
What is the exit strategy?
Yeah.
Because homes are not liquid.
Yeah.
And with rates where they are today versus where they were when most people bought their homes, in combination with prices, most of the time people cannot afford to finance out their partner.
Yeah.
Because you have to, even if you take a HELOC, that's at today's rates.
Yeah.
So you're adding a payment to the payment you already have.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get rid of your lower rate by refinancing.
Yep.
Because then your payment not only goes up, but more of your payment is going to interest than it currently is versus your principal. So there are a lot of factors. It's not like a one size fits all. This is how you get your partner out. This is how you keep your house. It really depends on their individual needs and what their agreements are.
Yeah. And that's critical because if you don't agree to it, then you may have to call me, not on the prenup side, but on the divorce side in the future when there is a disagreement. And I'm going to tell you that we can either negotiate a resolution through the various tools that we have, like collaborative law and mediation, or we have to go to a judge. And guess how much the judge knows about real property and the market and mortgages? Not much is what I'll say. And that judge is going to make a decision on your behalf, whether you like it or not, if you have to go to the courtroom.
Not to mention the time and additional resources you're tying up to do that, what you could have discussed ahead of time.
Yep.
For a lot more affordably and without dragging yourself and your children potentially, or your family or your friends through an experience that doesn't have to exist worse than it already is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because my husband and I, we have a prenup, as I'm sure you're not surprised. And it was so
I'd expect nothing less.
Exactly. And he's an engineer, but we joke because every once in a while I'll come home and I'll be venting about, not specifics of a case, of course, for attorney-client privilege, but just venting about a scenario. And my husband every time, well, didn't they have a prenup? Why didn't they have a prenup? Do people actually get married nowadays without a prenup? I'm like, he's like, thank God we have a prenup. And I'm just like, oh, you're so cute. You need to come on Legal Lounge and tell everyone. Because at least for us, we made it so clear from the get-go that similar to your marriage, it's like we both understand how we own this property during the marriage itself. So it doesn't lead to financial disagreements or discord. And then should it, and again, I'm not worried about our marriage at all, but should something happen where we were to separate, we already have the blueprint, if you will, on how things would be divided. So we don't even have anything to really argue over.
Yeah. And I just think that's important beyond the house for every aspect. I mean, we revisit our will every 12 to 18 months to make sure nothing substantial has changed, to make sure there's a blueprint for if one or both of us are no longer able to take care of our son, or what happens to the property, anything like that. I just think it's so important to, when you're in your right mind and when everyone's being reasonable, to have a plan in place for your assets.
Yeah, that's critical. So let's fast forward to that other side of marriage that we hope we can, I don't know, I have this possibly naive dream that I can impact the divorce rate and actually bring it down. I know, I'm in the clouds. Thank you, Nicole. She's looking at me weird.
I've gotten divorced enough for both of us, so I think I covered it.
But to that extent, it's figuring out how can we, if people do get divorced, how can we make it more amicable? And so what would you tell a couple, or say a friend who's deciding to go through a divorce, specifically about their real property, to try to keep things amicable?
Sure. Number one, I'd say, are either of you planning to stay in this house? Because again, my job is to sell properties or help people purchase properties, but my personal goal is not to convince someone to sell if they're not selling. So I start with, can you save this property if either of you want to? And what does that look like? Who can stay in it? Secondly, do you have the other financial resources to stay here without refinancing or without pulling out a HELOC to buy your partner out? and what does that look like? And then connecting them to the right person to advise on their finances, whether that be a financial planner, whether that be a credit union who has the best HELOC rates typically, whether it's a loan officer that we work closely with to talk about refinancing. And then once they know what their options are, okay, are any of these viable for you? Because if you want to stay and the finances don't add up for you staying, then that's, we're going to be at an impasse. You're ultimately going to need to sell your property.
I was going to just add to that, when I think of finances, because I'm also looking at it from the bigger picture of all the financial obligations that may need to be spread amongst the parties during a divorce, I not only think about a mortgage amount or a HELOC loan that may be a new loan in a payment. I'm also thinking about, okay, how much have you guys been paying in landscaping? How much have you been paying in cleaning the house? How much have you been paying on just maintaining this house? Because maybe the finances actually work out well for you to keep the house, but by keeping the house, are you now not able to furnish the whole thing?
Right.
Like, do you actually want that big a house is one question I ask my clients. Or do you want more cash flow so you can actually spend it on other things and free up the obligation of, say, that mortgage payment or that new furniture or that lawn care provider?
And it's hard too, because everyone has to live somewhere. So no matter what, you're paying rent or mortgage to someone somewhere. You're either paying the bank, you purchase in cash and you paid yourself, or you're paying the bank. Or you're renting and you're paying the landlord. I forget about renting because it's such a bad idea. But there is a time and place where renting is completely appropriate. And divorce is actually one of them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I'll have people reach out and they'll be like, I'm divorcing, we're selling our house, I want to buy something new. Or even after a breakup that's not a divorce at all, I'm like, maybe this is a time you could take a beat and just rent for a year, see where you want to land, see what happens in your life. You don't have to make these big gesture movements immediately if you don't have to. So sometimes I almost discourage people from buying immediately because I'm like, how do you know what your next life is yet?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And I've seen it too, because a lot of my clients I agree with you. Renting is the option that should be temporary, not forever. Granted, that's not financial advice. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, homeowners are 40% wealthier than people who rent for their lifetime. So it is both financial and if you're able to buy and it makes sense, it is a good financial decision.
That's fair. Yeah.
Not everyone has to buy. Yeah.
But to your point about someone who's coming out of a separation or divorce, especially if it's been particularly nasty, I encourage renting all day, every day. At least for that separation period, which in North Carolina, yes, you have to wait a year. I get it. Sometimes people will roll their eyes, but yes, you do have to wait that year. And I say more so from a mental health perspective. I'll give a story real quick. I had a client, she walked into my office for a consultation. And I remember this because she's like, I'm keeping the house. And I was like, well, hi, my name's Theresa. What's your name? Like, that was like the first thing. She's like, I'm keeping the house. And I said, okay. So did the consultation. She retained and we had another meeting. And she's like, I want to keep the house. I'm like, okay. Tell me more about the house. I
understand, my friend.
Tell me about the house. Tell me all about it. And it was beautiful, big house. She had raised her 3 kids in it. She was a stay-at-home parent for most of those years with the children. The youngest was about to graduate from high school. Beautiful house. And I was like, so after your youngest moves out, are you going to have roommates? She's like, no. Are you going to have family members move in? She's like, no. I was like, okay, so this is a really big house for just you. So that's one thing to think about.
Yeah, like pick your chips. Yeah. What do you want to be bargaining for?
Exactly. Like this is really big. So there's that. Second was those memories are yours. They're in your heart. They're in your memories. Take pictures. So in case you start losing your memories, we have pictures, but they're not actually in the house. The house is a symbol of those memories. I get it. But Are you going to sacrifice your next chapter by trying to keep this house? And yeah, we could have probably made the numbers work, but I was thinking mentally and emotionally and hell, even physically, because she has to help clean that house. Even if she hires a cleaner, there's still the day to day.
Yeah.
And she went home, and it was very interesting because I didn't know I was going to win this battle, if you will. She went home a couple weeks later. She came back and she's like, okay, let's sell the house. I'm like, great. This made the whole property distribution a lot easier from my perspective, from a legal perspective. We divided everything. She actually rented for a little while to that point. And then she started looking at townhouses. And it was the first time she had ever looked at townhouses. And she's like, there are some nice townhouses out there. And she went and she bought a nice luxury townhouse. She loved the task of shopping for townhouses so much, she's now a realtor.
That's hilarious.
I know. I'm like, it literally helped you find your own career path. Like, this is crazy. But that's just an example where it's like sometimes we get stuck on this idea of keeping the house. And it really is, to your earlier comments, more about what's best for your situation in your next chapter.
I think that varies too, because I have a friend and they want to keep their kids in the same school district. And they purchased, their house is almost doubled in value, literally. Their rate is 3%. And they can't individually purchase in the school district for even close to what they're paying. So if one of them keeps the house, they have to give up something else in the divorce settlement, like a 401k or maybe some of the market funds. So I sat down with one of my friends and clients and I did the math. I said, hey, if you keep the house, instead of buying him out and increasing your payment, if you gave the 401k and we did the math, we divided it in half. I said, and I don't even know if this is your exact conversation, but just for sake of exercise, then you technically would keep your lower payments. You're not paying any selling fees. The kids stay in the school that they're in because, there would not be an option, really. And you can sell it to him look at all the money you can make in the market. If the S&P averages 9 to 12% over the next 20 years, you actually make more than I could ever buy you out for.
Yeah.
And because that was the most important thing to her is keeping the house. I'm like, I'll sell it if you want. You can't repurchase this house or anything like it in this district for anything close to what you're spending.
Yeah.
And so I do think it comes down to what are you giving up?
Yeah. And
what is it actually costing you? Because it's not just costing you the house, like you mentioned. Maintenance, living, your opportunity costs of what you could be getting on the other side if you are dividing other assets, all of it.
Yeah, yeah. And that actually brings up a really good point, too, is houses generally determine school districts and where your children are going to go to school. So we actually just had a case earlier this week where someone's like, oh, I'm going to buy a new house. And they were the one house of the already separated couple that was in the child's school district. So by them moving just up nonchalant, not having a care in the world and switching their houses, they have now forced the switch of the child's school. And they're like, why can't this child just stay? We were like, that's not how school districts work.
I know.
And so now we have that turmoil again.
And there is so many considerations. Like when people are thinking about what house they're going to live in, they're thinking about their lifestyle. They're thinking about what do they want to be close to. They're thinking about, can they grow into it or out of it? They're thinking about jobs. They're thinking about how they live in their house. Do you host people? Is it a hosting? There's so many factors to consider. And all of those things in a time of turmoil are even harder to consider because the unknown is the future. So you don't have any of that information to make that decision within that time, which is why it's so important to have it made for you ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Wow. We have totally gotten into all the I'm sure people are like, I am not going to buy or sell or do anything without my realtor and attorney's input. And I would respond, yes, you are correct. Do not move a finger, please.
Do not move.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining me in the Legal Lounge. It's been a pleasure having you here. Before we go, though, where can a listener find you if they're interested in learning more?
I love it. Thank you for having me. They can find me on my website, mypremierproperty.com, or just call my personal cell at 704-964-8718.
Thanks, Nicole, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.